Britain once controlled nearly a quarter of the world, yet its grip on different lands never followed the same pattern. The story of America and India reveals a mystery that shaped the modern world. Why did Britain lose the American colonies in just a few decades, but manage to rule India for more than 200 years? This question leads us deep into the hidden mechanics of empire, the strategies of power, and the struggles of people who lived under foreign domination. In America, resistance began early. Colonists resented taxes, restrictions on trade, and interference in local governance. The cry of no taxation without representation united farmers, merchants, and intellectuals alike. The Boston Tea Party of 1773 was not just a protest against tea. It was a symbol of collective defiance. By the time the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord in 1775, the colonies had already formed a united front. Their leaders, Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, were all speaking with one voice, demanding liberty. America was far from Britain, across an ocean, and supplying armies there was costly. Within a few years, Britain was forced to surrender. India, however, was an entirely different story. The British first arrived as traders through the East India Company. Gradually, by using diplomacy, deceit, and military power, they expanded their control. Instead of facing one unified resistance, they encountered dozens of kingdoms, languages, and communities. They exploited rivalries between princes, stirred religious divisions, and promised protection in exchange for loyalty. By the mid-1700s, victories like Plassey had secured vast territories for them. Unlike America, India was not united against Britain. Instead, Britain used India's own diversity as a weapon. The revolt of 1857 marked India's first great uprising. Soldiers, peasants, and princes rose together, furious at land seizures, cultural impositions, and disrespected traditions. For a moment, it looked like British rule would collapse. But the revolt lacked central leadership, and alliances crumbled quickly. Some rulers joined the rebels, others sided with Britain. Distrust between Hindus and Muslims further weakened the cause. When the revolt was crushed, the East India Company was dissolved, and India came under direct rule of the crown. Queen Victoria became Empress of India, and the British Raj was born. In the decade that followed, Britain reshaped India into its crown jewel. Railways, telegraphs, and canals were built, but not for India's prosperity. They were tools of extraction and control. Railways allowed troops to move swiftly during uprisings. Telegraph lines ensured London could command instantly from afar. Canals and agriculture were redirected toward cash crops, feeding British industries, while leaving Indian farmers vulnerable to famine. A vast bureaucracy was set up, with British officers at the top, and only a handful of Indians allowed in. India's textile industry, once the pride of the world, collapsed under the flood of British imports. America, after independence, built its own industries and infrastructure. India's resources, by contrast, were drained to fuel Britain's empire. Yet seeds of resistance were sprouting. By the late 1800s, a new Indian middle class had emerged, educated in English, familiar with Western ideas of liberty and rights. They began questioning British authority. The formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885 gave voice to Indian aspirations. At first, their demands were modest: reforms, representation, greater inclusion. But as famine struck and evidence of economic exploitation mounted, anger grew. Thinkers like Dadabhai Naoroji exposed the drain of wealth, showing how India's riches flowed endlessly to Britain while poverty deepened at home. Still, unity was elusive. Religious differences widened, and Britain played them skillfully. Whenever calls for independence grew stronger, British officials encouraged suspicion between Hindus and Muslims, or between castes and communities. Divide and rule was their most effective strategy. Unlike America, where colonists could rally under a single banner, India remained fractured well into the 20th century. A turning point came with Mohandas Gandhi. Returning from South Africa in the early 1900s, Gandhi introduced a weapon unlike any Britain had faced before: nonviolent resistance. He believed India could not defeat Britain militarily, but could withdraw cooperation. British rule depended on Indian clerks, Indian soldiers, Indian workers. If Indians refused to obey, the empire would crumble. Campaigns like the Salt March of 1930 showed the power of mass mobilization. Millions joined in, refusing to pay taxes, boycotting British goods, and filling jails willingly. For the first time, independence was not just a dream of elites, but a movement of ordinary men and women. The world wars hastened Britain's decline. In both conflicts, India supplied soldiers, resources, and money, but in return, promises of reform were broken. In World War II, famine struck Bengal in 1943, killing millions while Britain continued exporting grain. Resentment reached a breaking point. Gandhi launched the Quit India movement in 1942, demanding immediate withdrawal. Though brutally suppressed, the movement revealed how untenable Britain's rule had become. Subhas Chandra Bose, meanwhile, sought alliances abroad to fight Britain militarily, proving resistance was spreading across all fronts. By the end of World War II, Britain was bankrupt and weakened. The empire that had once dominated the globe could no longer hold India by force. Independence was inevitable. Yet Britain's final act was one of division. In 1947, India was partitioned into two nations, India and Pakistan. The partition unleashed chaos, millions displaced, countless lives lost, but also marked the end of Britain's two-century rule. So why did Britain lose America so quickly, but hold India for so long? Geography played a role. America was distant, expensive to control, while India was directly occupied. But the deeper reason was unity. Americans rallied together early, creating a single revolutionary identity. India, with its immense diversity, was easier for Britain to divide and exploit. Only when unity was forged under leaders like Gandhi did independence become unstoppable. The legacy of these struggles remains powerful. America became a global power within a century of independence. India, though scarred by colonial exploitation, has risen as one of the world's largest democracies. Both stories reveal a truth that no empire can escape. Freedom does not come from wealth, weapons, or resources, but from unity and determination. Britain's empire fell, but the spirit of those who fought for liberty, whether in Boston or in Bengal, still shapes the world today.